I bet that you can recall a moment during your divorce or after your divorce where you felt especially alone. I certainly remember mine. It was about 8 months after my ex left, and I was meeting him in court. And at one point, the judge asked me to move out to the hallway so that she could talk with my ex and his attorney about the future of the house. So I left the courtroom and sat on a cold, hard bench out in the hallway, a sterile, nondescript hallway. And inside that courtroom was the man that used to be the most important person to me, that had become a stranger. And in that hallway, I was invisible. Other attorneys and clients were just walking by, never even glanced at me, nor should they. But yet inside that courtroom, my life, my future was being decided, and I was sitting alone, invisible. That's loneliness. We often think that loneliness has to do with being alone, being physically alone. And sometimes it does, but there's a lot more to it. So, we often hear that loneliness is a modern epidemic. And that's the case, even though in so many ways we're more connected than we've ever been. And that's because loneliness isn't so much a lack of connection. Loneliness is a lack of meaningful connection. And that loneliness can happen even when you're not alone. In fact, I bet for some of you, you may have felt lonelier in your marriage when you had somebody else there than you do now. I mean, there's nothing more isolating than sitting right next to somebody and yet feeling like you're unnoticed, unwanted, invisible. That's what loneliness is. And oh, do we feel it after divorce in spades. So part of loneliness after divorce comes because you've lost your person. This was somebody that you've shared perhaps years of your life with. And they were somebody that you probably showed more of yourself to than you did to most. Somebody that used to see you, at least. Somebody that you felt knew you. And now they're gone. And that's a huge void. It's something enormous that's missing from your life. So of course you feel that loss. You feel that void. You feel lonely. But there's so much more to it than that, isn't there? That shared history, those memories that maybe used to bring you comfort, well, they've been poisoned too, haven't they? And that's one of the cruel effects of divorce is, also often memories, good memories, are what bring us comfort when we're feeling lonely. We can say, hey, even though I'm alone right now, I'm isolated right now, you can recall those times when you felt connected, when you felt like you were being seen. But with divorce, those memories are now toxic, at least at first. You can't trust them, and they simply just bring up the loss all over again. And then for those of you that have children, especially if you have shared physical custody, oh, does that bring up the loneliness, I bet. When those days or hours that you're used to spending with your kids, all of a sudden they're gone. Like they've just been whisked away, and now you're left. You're feeling lost in that moment. Who are you? Normally so much of your identity is caught up in being a parent. And then when all of a sudden you're not that anymore in that moment, well, then what then? How do you matter then? We even experience loneliness after divorce with our homes. You know, home is often that sanctuary. It's where you can escape. It's where the world no longer matters and you feel kind of that big hug of the walls. But divorce steals that from us too. You know, if you're in the marital home, well, it's hard, isn't it? It's familiar, yet it's alien. It's haunted, you know, it's haunted with those memories. It taunts you, you know, with what could have been, what maybe should have been, but isn't. And so you feel like you no longer quite belong there. It's almost like you're entering a museum, not really a home, definitely not a sanctuary. And then if you're in a new space, well, it feels sterile, doesn't it? It's not yours. It's like you're in a hotel room. You know, you're just one more face visiting, passing through. It's not yours. And then often people, in an attempt to not feel lonely after divorce, they turn to dating, perhaps quite soon. And it makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, you're feeling like you don't matter. You're feeling unseen. And so you want to put people into your life and you want to feel noticed and appreciated. And yeah, dating does those things. And it also fills your calendar. It fills your hours so that you don't sit and wallow in your loneliness. But it often has another effect as well. Sometimes we feel more alone. Again, loneliness is less about being physically alone and more about feeling emotionally isolated and unseen, like you don't matter. And when you're dating, you know, these people to you at the beginning, they're strangers. And so they don't know you. So they really can't see you. And so you feel misunderstood. You feel like they're making assumptions about you because they are, because they're having to fill in pieces because you're a stranger to them as well. Now, in upcoming videos, I'm going to share a lot more information with you about loneliness after divorce and what you can do. But I'm going to go ahead and give you a few tips today on what you can do. So one of the first things you can do is plan ahead for those loneliness. So one of the first things you can do is plan ahead for some of those loneliest moments. So I'm especially thinking of the parents with shared custody. If you know that your kids are going to be gone every other weekend, the worst thing you can do is go into that weekend without any plans and end up sitting by yourself in your home, noticing the silence. Instead, I challenge you to look at this as a gift. You know, most parents don't get much of a break from being a parent. Well, one of the silver linings with divorce is, hey, you get this break. You get this respite. So you better take advantage of it. Plan that time. Doesn't really matter what you're doing, but get yourself busy, get yourself out of the house, do those things that you can't normally do because parenting is such a full-time job. If you plan ahead, those moments aren't gonna hit you quite so hard. Reframe what it means to be single. So I think for a lot of us, we have this image of single as somehow being sad. It's like you weren't chosen for the kickball team. But that's not what single means. Look around you. I bet you have people in your life that are single by choice, perhaps have been their entire lives, and yet they're doing awesome. They have fulfilling lives. They have lots of deep and meaningful connections with friends and family. They're connected to their communities. They're doing amazing things. Look at them as your inspiration. Single does not have to mean desperate or lonely or unwanted. All that single means is you are your own person. So take that and run with it. Celebrate your independence. And this can be done in really some small ways. So a really silly one that I did, my ex absolutely hated the smell of fruity bubble gum. Now, I didn't particularly have a major affinity for it, so I was more than happy to give it up while we were together. But one of the first things I did after he left is I went out and I bought myself a big old pack of strawberry bubble gum, and I chewed it whenever I wanted. And yeah, it was small, but yet it was a sign to myself of like, hey, this is a new chapter in your life. You know, the thing is for a lot of us, we like being in a relationship. We like being coupled. But there's also some amazing, amazing benefits to being single. So while you're in that space, take advantage of them. This is the time when you can redecorate your bedroom and you don't have to ask what anybody else thinks of the color or the pattern. You can go out and buy whatever clothes you want. You can get whatever tattoo you want. You can, assuming you're not having to come home for the children, you can stay out all night and there's nobody at home worried about where you are. It's kind of freeing, isn't it? So take advantage of that side of it and go do those things that you want to do. Embrace the table for one. I know often people feel awkward, doing certain things without a partner, whether that be going out to dinner or going to an event. But really, nobody else is looking at you. Nobody else is wondering, hey, why is that person all by themselves? That's so awkward. They don't care. So why should you? So go out to dinner, bring a book with you and sit by yourself, or go sit at the bar to eat your dinner and go meet some new people. It's an opportunity to really kind of expand your world, because often when we go somewhere with somebody else, we don't interact with a larger community. We only interact with the person that we came with. But if you go alone, you're going to be observing more and interacting with more. It's pretty awesome. This is kind of a hard one. But one of the ways to counteract loneliness is to practice vulnerability. And I know that's hard, especially once you've been hurt so badly. The last thing you want to do is open yourself up again and to risk being hurt. I know. But again, loneliness is a lack of meaningful connection. So if you don't let yourself be seen, you're never going to feel seen. The only way to build relationships where you don't feel isolated, where you don't feel lonely, is to be vulnerable. Now, at first, I recommend practicing this. And yes, it's practice. You're not going to get it right at first. Practice this with safe people. People that you trust aren't going to hurt you. People that you already feel pretty close with. These can be friends, family, therapist. It doesn't really matter. But what happens is if we keep those walls up for too long, it becomes a habit. And it's a scary one to break. So the best thing to do is just let yourself be open, let yourself be vulnerable, keep practicing it, keep trying. Don't let yourself wall yourself away from the world. And then finally, refrain from isolation. For a lot of us, especially introverts, when we're hurt, we tend to hide, kind of like a wounded animal curling up in its den because it knows that it doesn't want others to see its weaknesses. So some of us do that. We pull inside, we isolate. And the thing is, when you're doing that, you're causing your loneliness there. You're keeping yourself in the dark where nobody else can reach you. So be careful not to isolate yourself too much. Even if you have to force it, make yourself get out there. It is hard at first. But like with anything, practice makes better, and it does get easier. So loneliness after divorce is probably one of the most common, difficult, and lasting responses that people have. And it's perfectly natural. You know, you've lost so much and you haven't yet learned how to fill that void. But I want you to know this, that loneliness that you're feeling, it doesn't have to last. It doesn't have to be your way of existing for the long term. There are things that you can do to help you feel connected to others again.